Back from the long weekend of Locked On Coyotes as we get ready for the NHL Draft. That's coming up in just a couple of days. How exciting it is. We're going to break things down and get you all ready, get you all hyped for the upcoming draft. All in today's episode of Locked On Coyotes.
You're Locked On Coyotes, your daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Robyn Leonio. That's Carl Pavlik right beside me. On today's episode of Locked On Coyotes, we got a great show for you guys today. Before we get in, I want to thank everyone for making this show your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, and that does mean you will never have a paywall ever to access our content. Hope you guys had a great weekend, a very safe weekend. Celebrating the Independence Day on Monday for our American listeners, any of our Canadian listeners out there celebrating Canada Day at the end of last week.
That's Friday.
That's Friday. There we go. But now we're back from the weekend. It is draft week. The draft is only in about 2 days from now because today is Tuesday. The draft is on Thursday. Oh God. Everything's just creeping up, Carl.
Yeah, it's going pretty quickly. This just entire time of the year feels off. It feels like it's way too late or too early or something. But things are happening quickly.
They are happening quickly indeed, and we have to ramp up our draft coverage here on Locked On Coyotes. So on today's episode, we're going to talk some storylines to pay attention to as we get closer to the draft. I think so, Carl, right? Three storylines we're going to get to on today's episode. Yeah. And there's a lot to get to because if you're the Arizona Coyotes, there's definitely three storylines to get to. And I think the first things first is what happens in the top three.
Sure. Definitely. Honestly, the team I'm very concerned that I have no real knowledge of is New Jersey. I have no idea what they're planning to do. I think that's kind of been apparent to everyone we've talked to. I'm just I don't know what New Jersey's going to do. And depending on, how they decide to play it, this could go a number of different ways for the Coyotes.
Absolutely. There's so many different ways you could do it. I think especially because we go back to what we talked about at the end of last week, right? When we talked about we took an analysis look into the mock drafts and compared it to others. What's interesting, I think that we're going to have to discuss again, is the fact that there is no consensus number one anymore. Shane Wright was the consensus number one for the entirety of the time. And now there's actually some contesting. Obviously, Logan Cooley's only showed up at number one in one mock draft that I've seen, but Yuri Slafkovsky in about 2, 3, 4. I have no idea how many.
Yeah.
And some from some really, really prominent media members yes, Slafkovsky is our number one.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And the fact that this is happening now, after the seasons are over and just everyone's trying to contextualize where these players can be, what purpose do they serve. It's definitely it's interesting to see because I don't think any of us, I know we certainly didn't expect Slafkovsky to be kind of almost strong candidate for number one. I was going to call him a dark horse, but he's not really a dark horse. He is a legitimate candidate that you can make a case for.
I mean, especially because if you look at the top three guys, he is easily the biggest guy out there. And if you're somebody who wants to draft size, then he's your guy.
Yeah. If you want to draft size, if you're not too worried about position, I know like Shane Wright is a center. That is a highly valued position in the NHL. If you're like, we just want to get the best player, it doesn't matter if he's on wing or in center, or your team like the New Jersey Devils, who are like, hey, we're kind of good on center. We don't really need him. Like, I don't know. What do you do?
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how it all plays out when draft day comes, and especially because I'm gonna go back to something I said last week. The fact that because there was so much hype around Shane Wright, and how relatively close I think his team played to to um, to Montreal, and I think I was reading an article from Craig Morgan on PHNX, and he said that essentially he played at a distance of what would be equivalent of Flagstaff to Gilbert.
Yeah.
That's how close he was to Montreal.
And like Canadians will travel. And there was, I think, lessened travel restrictions at that point. Certainly to get into America, it feels like there may have been, but I have not traveled internationally. I don't know. Could be talking out of my butt. But yeah, I'm sure plenty of people in Montreal made the trek down to see, what could be their player. As soon as it became apparent that their season was going to hell, like, why not?
Absolutely, and I think that's why it goes to the fact that if they don't pick Shane Wright, I do feel like there might be some like discourse just to right off the bat. I mean,
I
and
mean,
again, that's not saying that's like like it's a bad pick if they pick Slavkovsky. It just feels like if they don't pick Wright because of how much he's been talked about.
I'm curious. Like, I definitely agree. There will be discourse in Montreal about it, but there will be discourse internationally about it too. Like, I do think that there will be people who question, did Montreal overthink this one? Did they get caught up in the recent hype? Like, is this a recency bias issue where, like, Shane Wright was the guy for all the season. Now all of a sudden there's like a bunch of reports saying that, it's this other guy. Like, I don't know. That could be, you could make the case that is overthinking the pick. And if we know anything about hockey media types, it's they love to make those kind of pieces. Like, because yeah, there's a good chance that they are overthinking the pick, and there's a good chance that whoever writes that is going to be proven right in the next couple of years if they decide to go that route. I'm not saying they will, but I won't write that pick or piece depending on what New Jersey does, because I don't know.
I
The
think
Coyotes are in that position.
I think the biggest thing regarding this storyline, and it's a sub storyline that we might have to see they want to pay attention to, is if Montreal ends up going to Slavkovsky and not Wright, what New Jersey decides to do with their draft pick, because uh, they've already said they didn't want a center. Like that's why they went to Slavkovsky at 2, right?
Yeah.
That's one. And two, maybe they now see that as an opportunity. They see Wright available, and all of a sudden the number two pick draft stock immediately shot up through the moon because Wright's available next. All right, who wants it? Like cough up who you got, and New Jersey can do something like that.
I mean, I would think so. Like, if you are the Coyotes at 3, or whoever's at 4, I forget who's at 4.
Seattle's at 4.
Seattle's at 4, 5.
Is Philadelphia.
Right. So, if you are New Jersey and you want to go with a defenseman, how confident are you that you can get a good defenseman at 4 or 5 or 3? I'd say you're pretty confident. So, like, I could see them getting an asset, and if you're the Coyotes and you hear that that's the case, I think you got to move up. I'm not sure what it takes. Like, don't sell the farm for, admittedly a phenomenal player, but yeah, at least make that call.
It's something you definitely had to think about as if that were to happen. It would, I'm pretty sure chaos will ensue in the National Hockey League if something like this happens. But I think we've seen crazier things happen in other situations. So it's wouldn't be the first, but it would still be crazy.
Yeah, things get crazy at the draft.
Anyways, we still got more to get to on today's episode of Locked On Coyotes. We're talking 3 storylines that we need to pay attention to ahead of the 2022 NHL Draft. We're going to get to those other 2 in just a moment, but first we're going to go to Carl for a quick word.
So I have a message from our friends at Built Bar. From the people who invented healthy and tasty, you're going to get something that's a real gift for your taste buds. If you've tried anything with coconut or brownie, this is definitely the thing you want to get, because Built has given you the coconut brownie chunk puff treatment. It's so good. You know the puffs, they're always good. I have gotten a chance to try a few Built Bar puffs. I really liked the mud pie one, but this one, coconut brownie chunk, that's a lot. Coconut, highly underrated flavor. I like coconut water. I like coconut chunks. Plus brownie, perfect thing. And you get all that in a puff, which is just the best part. And they're guilt-free. It's almost like they're actually good for you. What I want you to do is go to built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15 so you can get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com.
Thanks again, everybody, for making Locked On Coyotes your first listen every day. The NHL Draft, once again, is around the corner, and our team of local hosts and draft experts are breaking it down with insights and analysis for every first-round pick. You can join myself. You might see me every now and then. Pop in for picks right after the Coyotes pick at number 3, or any other picks that they might make. Big picks that they might make in the first round. All of it can also be found at Locked On NHL. So be sure to you can check it out. You can see all the other hosts doing stuff at once again, check Locked On NHL and Locked On Coyotes on YouTube for all the latest breakdowns and reactions of the NHL Draft and more. But let's get back to today's episode as we break down the 3 storylines we're going to pay attention to as the Coyotes and the rest of the National Hockey League approaches the NHL Draft in just a couple of days. And Carl, number 2 is all Coyotes for me. Is what's the decision for Jakob Chychrun?
Yep. That's a good one. It's something that we've talked about a lot with pretty much every guest we've had on. The topic of Jakob Chychrun has come up just because he's a very important player for the Coyotes. I think something that we've talked about a lot is if he's going to get moved, it's probably going to be at the draft. So, I'm not saying if he survives with the team, after the draft, he's going to be with the team guaranteed at the start of the next season. But I'd say it becomes far more likely they will be.
Yeah, it's so far the reports are saying that they said obviously the Coyotes are trying to keep a hammer down. At this time, Jakob Chychrun will be playing for the Coyotes next season.
Yeah.
But again, they said they're continually listening to offers, and if during the draft a call is made that Bill Armstrong cannot say no to, that deal is done.
Yeah. And we've gotten those kind of deals before. I think that the Darcy Kemper trade was one that Bill Armstrong could not say no to. The Christian Dvorak trade, although probably should have done that one a little bit differently, considering what happened to Montreal. Maybe shouldn't have top 10 protected that. Should have fought harder for that. But yeah, I do think that if someone calls with something amazing and there's a player that Bill Armstrong really wants, then he's going to make that call. He's going to take it.
Yeah, he's got. I mean, and he's got to, right. There's so many decisions to be made with that, and I think, you know, I think it's important to be said that it's like Chychrun wants to be able to play for a competitive team, right? So you kind of already know he already has one foot out the door because he doesn't really have the motivation to play through a rebuild.
I mean, do we know that for? Do we know anything for sure about what Jakob Chychrun's state of mind is?
I mean, again, you got to pay attention to what he said during locker room cleanout a couple months ago. Like,
Yeah, but everyone also wants to play for a competitive team. You don't get to become a professional hockey player if you don't want to be competitive. Like, I do think that there is something to be said with like a player like Chychrun knowing that like if this rebuild goes right, this could be a good team 3 years from now. That's when it's going to be competitive. And I'll still be able to make money. Like these guys are going to be on ELCs. So like there is a competitive version of the Coyotes in there somewhere if he has faith in the rebuild. And it's the job of the management to make sure that he has faith in the rebuild.
the difficult part about that, though, is only a few years left on his contract. By the time that it's up, are they fully emerged from the rebuild yet? That's one. Two, there's I just had it too, but it escaped my head. But there we go. He's in the prime of his career, right? He's approaching like he's just about the prime of his career. Like
No,
these next 3-4 years are his.
he's 24. So, and defensemen, it's usually the late 20s when they're hitting their prime. So, he is going to be in his prime 4 years from now when the Coyotes are like done with the rebuild. Unless he peaks early, which I mean, who knows? Yeah, could happen. I would not say that Jakob Chychrun is a player that needs to be worried about. Like the whole conversation we had over like Connor Garland and him being like too old for the rebuild. That was the case because A, he was a forward, B, he was 25, and Chychrun's not even 25 yet.
That's fair. Yeah, Garland was a whole different situation, and we knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
That was like the best kept, like what's the term? One of the worst kept secrets. There you go.
Yeah.
One of the worst kept secrets out there.
I would agree. It seemed like it was definitely going to be the case. I didn't think that Armstrong was going to get the deal he did, but it seemed like Garland was on the move.
Yeah. But anyways, though, with guarding Chychrun, though, if he gets traded, it happens like during the draft.
Yeah, I think so. Because it's a big part of what Bill Armstrong's going to be looking for is a pick, and that's when you're worried about the draft picks. I do kind of wonder if especially when he sees like kind of the scope of the board, if he decides to go with a 2023 pick as opposed to a 2022, in which case, less hassle about that. Although you imagine you include like a second round pick from this year or something. I don't know, but yeah, it definitely seems like it's going to be in the draft if it does happen.
Yeah, absolutely. We still got more to get to though on this episode of Locked On Coyotes. We're talking 3 storylines that we have to pay attention to ahead of the Arizona Coyotes and the NHL draft on Thursday. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But first, I want to let you guys know today's episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it is impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? Is your Audacy an LX or an EX? Well, wait for the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only the brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. You can save time and money when using Rock Auto because you're looking through their catalog of what they have which obviously will also save you a lot of money, up to 50% or even more for the same parts than if you were to get them from a chain store or a car dealership. Rock Auto is a family business here and do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, with their prices being reliably low for every customer. I want you guys to check it out yourself. Go to rockauto.com now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. And write Locked On and their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, let's wrap things up with this episode of Locked On Coyotes. 3 storylines that we had to pay attention to for the Arizona Coyotes and the National Hockey League ahead of the 2022 NHL Entry Draft. And Carl, I'm going to turn to you if you have anything on your mind, because obviously I put the first 2 out there. If you have anyone that you want to put out there, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but
I was going to go with Jakob Chychrun, if I'm being fair. That seemed
yeah.
like it was shooting fish in the barrel. I do kind of wonder if there is going to be concern with NHL teams about drafting Russian players or Belarusian players at this draft. That is, one of those things where you really hope that it doesn't impact, but with the world the way it is, with Russia the way it is right now, with the United States the way it is right now, who knows if teams are a little bit more cautious about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. With what is going on right now, that the fact that there is probably going to be a lot more caution about it and a lot more thought process before they make a decision, which is like kind of an unfortunate thing, because if there are some really good Russian players or Belarusian players out there, they should get the same kind of thought process, the same kind of process going through, right? Because they're just as good. They just happen to be going through a more difficult situation with the countries they play in.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw, but Ivan Fedetov was detained for reading the CNN headline, allegedly evading military service. Who knows what that's really going to, lead to. I know that there are countries with mandatory services, not just Russia. There's quite a few countries. I think Sweden tends to be the big one that comes up for hockey. But yeah, is there going to be concern that, the military doesn't want to release any of their people? They want to have a national army team just for, prestige. Who knows? Unfortunately, right now, a couple of kids' lives are going to be like pawns in a giant geopolitical crisis that most of them have absolutely nothing to do with.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting thought process on that. That the fact that they weren't even able to go, because I mean, one of the big things that we've also discussed though is the fact that should a player actually get drafted, the majority of these players aren't going to go straight to the NHL anyways.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that's gonna make a better decision. It's like, oh yeah, we could just leave you in Russia or leave you in that's not what I'm saying. But
it is kind of in 2 years it's either going to be fixed or it's going to be much worse that we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, it's just it's more of just okay, we're not gonna we're gonna draft you. We have your rights to you. Let's just hope things resolve by then.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And I mean, that's what's been done in the past. There was never really a guarantee that, you'd be able to bring over a Russian player or a European player. And that was kind of it wasn't a great time for hockey. The NHL having the best players all around the world creates an elite level of competition that, all of us really enjoy. And getting to see different countries' styles influence the game in general is something that I think we're all kind of, we all have experience with. The rise of Swedish defensemen and that kind of play style has been a very obvious thing in hockey that you don't really see like 30 years ago.
And that's why, and that's one of the things why I love the NHL, right? Because you see a lot of players come from those backgrounds. Like you mentioned, the Swedish defenseman. You maybe every now and then you might get uh, a Czech forward, right?
Yeah.
Or a Swiss goaltender. Like,
Or we were talking about the fact that we have two pretty highly rated Slovakian prospects. Like, is that going to be a future thing to watch? And I mean, it kind of all spills over to the other countries too. Like, they are not necessarily operating the same way that they would. Ukraine doesn't have a big hockey program that we know of. There's not a lot of Ukrainian players drafted, but if that conflict spills into other ones like Finland or Norway, like that could potentially be some pretty big consequences. And when if sports are the reward for a healthy society, this society could get very unhealthy very soon.
and this issue, I will say, it does go beyond. Like, if you're looking at if you isolate it within the sports world, it's more than just hockey too. If you look at like basketball and other sports, import like here in the U.S., they import a lot of players from Eastern Europe. So that's like, if it continues, like, yeah, it's who knows how much of an impact that's going to make on you know like sports and everything like that.
Yeah. It's a real. It's a time full of uncertainty, which makes it a very scary time, especially for people like us who are supposed to know what's going on and communicate that, because there's only so much that we know, and there's only so much that the team knows. And I do kind of wonder, is that going to influence their decisions?
It very well could, and I think that's definitely something that we'll have to pay attention to. Any final thoughts that you have before we close things off on today's episode?
I just hope everyone had a good long holiday weekend. It's good to be back, and hope everyone's excited for draft. It's a fun week. It's a time where we have to do a lot of work, and I hope
Absolutely.
everyone enjoys it.
Absolutely, all the excitement is done. All the celebration of Joey Chestnut. Now it goes out. All that goes out the window. Now it's all focused on the draft. Let's go.
Yep,
Let's go.
exactly.
Anyways, that's going to be it for today's episode of Locked On Coyotes. If you like what you heard, don't forget to leave a review, like, comment, subscribe if you have yet to already. We're available everywhere you get your podcast, including on YouTube. Don't forget to interact with us on social media. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOn Coyotes, on Instagram at Locked On Coyotes, and on Twitter at LO_Coyotes. I am personally at Robyn_Leonio. Carl Pavlak is Carl Pavlak FFH. Interact with us, ask a question you might have. We might answer right back, or on a future episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning into today's episode. I hope you guys are staying safe out there. I hope you guys are staying healthy. And don't forget to howl on.